Hi, this is Tom again. This is the advanced video for Cantabile Batch Editor. I call it advanced, but the application is pretty simple to use. It's just some things that may not be quite so obvious when you first load up the application here. But most of this is pretty straightforward, especially once you understand the basic logic. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull up the same folder, the same set of files that we were using in the basic video. And if you haven't watched the basic video, I definitely encourage you to do that because that will give you a good understanding of exactly what this Cantabile Batch Editor can do and a little background on what we're going to talk about here. So everything has a tooltip in case you're not exactly sure what it does. And that's especially helpful with some of these settings. Use black, for example, may not be very obvious. But as the tooltip tells you, if it's checked, that means that black, which is the default Cantabile color, will be included as one of the colors used in the Colorize commands. If this is unchecked, then it will not use black. It will basically go through and try to give everything some other color. So the main thing I want to get into here is how does the batch editor know what color to assign to different objects? And the way it does that is for rack objects and states, you tell it what colors you want it to use. For setlist songs, there's really no way to do that. So for setlist songs, it's always just going to colorize them in that rainbow effect. But let's get into exactly how we specify these rack object colors. So if you click this little edit button here, it's going to open this file. As you can see, this file is in your app data roaming Loudcry software Cantabile batch editor folder, which will be created when you install the program. And it's a file called rackobjectcolors.txt. My default text editor is Notepad++. You probably have Notepad, but it doesn't really matter. You can use any text editor. And there are a bunch of comments here that explain exactly how to do this, but I'm just going to summarize it pretty quickly. We're going to actually start down here with assignment. So what happens is when you run the colorize rack objects command, it's going to look here at this assignment. And if you have any rack objects, for example, that have the word strings in them, then it's going to color that green. If you have a rack object that has the word cello in it, it's going to also color that green. If it has viol, which could, of course, be a violin or violins or viola or violas or whatever, if it just finds that string anywhere in the name of the rack, it's going to color it lime. Piano black, guitar red, etc. So you can change these however you want. If you noticed that, in fact, if we just look here, my Omnisphere 2 rack gets colored this blue color. Well, that's because right here I have Omnisphere 2 blue. I have Omnisphere 1 as navy, and Omnisphere 3 is purple. And this one doesn't have, well, actually, if you remember, we changed Omnisphere 3 to cyan because I ran that replace color command in the first video. That's why this is cyan instead of purple. But if I were to run Colorize racks again on this file, it would switch it back. So that's how you just tell it what colors you want to use. You do have to make sure that you spell these properly. These are the default Cantabile colors, so you can't just put whatever you want here. You have to use the actual colors that Cantabile uses, and you want to make sure you spell them properly. So what I would recommend doing is just using this part as a reference, which we'll get to in a second what the translation means. But it is important to understand that rows are in descending order of priority. So if the first test string is a match, the other test strings will not be evaluated. So if you had a rack, for example, that was called Omnisphere strings, then it's going to get colored green, not navy. Because once it finds that word strings, it's going to colorize it green and it's going to move on. So you can use that to your advantage. You just want to make sure that you order these properly. That's why Omnisphere 1, 2, and 3 are all listed above Omnisphere. Because if it finds a rack called Omnisphere 2, it's going to give it this blue color. If it comes across something called Omnisphere that's not 1, 2, or 3, it's just going to go ahead and call it navy. So just keep that in mind, that order is important here. Now, this translation section, you really only need to use if you are using custom colors in Cantabile. And this gets a little bit confusing, but as of build 3650, Cantabile has support for customized colors, and that's what this little window here was. So if you're not familiar with this, you can actually use different colors than the default colors. You're still limited to the 14 colors, I believe it is, that Cantabile gives you, but you can change these colors. So I could go red. I could change this and I could call it, let's just call it pink. And we'll change this color actually here to a lighter version. So if I do that, you notice that this object here, which was red, is now pink. That's because, again, you're limited to these 14 colors. So what Cantabile is doing is, instead of assigning an object red, any object that's supposed to get the first color, which normally is red, is now going to get colored pink. This may not be obvious, but if you actually open up a Cantabile file, you're not going to see the word pink anywhere in there. It's still going to store that object. It's going to store this break as being colored red. It's just that when you open the file in Cantabile and you have these custom colors, Cantabile is going to look at this and say, okay, red actually is supposed to be pink. If you were to open this file under a different configuration where this color was not customized, it was still red, this would appear red. So this is really, these custom colors are really just kind of, you can think of it as a translation from the normal color to the custom color only when you're using this configuration of Cantabile. And so the reason that is important is that in this file, if you have custom colors set up, you probably want to use those colors here in your assignment. So for example, guitar, I have red. So if I change this to pink, when the Cantabile batch editor opens it, it's not going to know what pink means because it doesn't know what custom colors you've assigned in Cantabile. That's where this translation part comes in. Here we specify that red equals pink. Hope that makes sense. It is very tricky to get your head around at first, but if you don't use custom colors, you can just leave this translation section completely empty. So we'll just switch that back. So that's how you assign colors or tell Cantabile Batch Editor, CBE for short, what color to assign rack objects. There's a similar file for states, and it works the exact same way. So if we go here, it's the exact same idea. It's just that now we're working with states instead of rack objects. So you can see here, I color verses green, I color choruses blue, and bridge red. And any other part of a song is just going to get a random color. And that's an important thing to understand about this Colorize too. If the batch editor comes across an object that it can't figure out what color it's supposed to be because there's no assignment to it. So maybe I have a state that's called ending. Well, I don't have any ending assignment here, so it doesn't know what to color it. So it's just going to assign it the first color that has not already been used. So if you notice, I don't have any maroon assignments here. So the first thing it comes across that it doesn't recognize, it's going to color maroon. That's really how you assign all these colors. That's one of the most important parts of this application, is making sure that you set those files up the way you want them. The last thing I'm going to mention here is a feature that you can see here at the bottom called Test in Cantabile. This actually was the most complicated part of the whole application to program. Anytime you're trying to control a different application through simulated mouse and keyboard commands, things can get a little bit wonky. So I think I've got it dialed in pretty well where it works very consistently, but it is important to realize that you do not want to touch your computer at all when you run this command, because it's going to be sending virtual or simulated keystrokes to Cantabile, and if you start moving your mouse around, or in particular using your keyboard, it could mess it up. So there is some configuration that goes with this as well. Not very much, but you can elect to test backup files or not. If you do test backup files, you can elect to only test the backups from the current day. I'm going to turn this off for now, just so that this doesn't take quite as long. And then you need to tell it what the path to your Cantabile program file, cantabile.exe, which is usually going to be this path right here. But if you have a different path, then you can change it. When I run this test in Cantabile, what it's going to do is it's going to open up each one of these files in Cantabile. just to make sure that it opens. So this is really just a way of making sure that whatever commands you've executed did not harm these files to a point where they can't open. There are some internal checks that the application does every time it runs a command, just to make sure that the data appears to be valid. But this is a little bit of an extra test just to make sure that Cantabile can open the file, because if Cantabile can open it, chances are very, very good that there was nothing destructive done. If there were some kind of a bug that took place in the way that data was changed in the file, it's extremely likely that would make the file not even open properly in Cantabile. And in this case, it wouldn't be that hard just to go through and open these files manually, but you can just imagine if we had dozens or even hundreds of files that we had operated on, you wouldn't want to go through and open all those up manually to make sure that they work. So you could just run this test in Cantabile command, let it sit there and do its thing. In that case, it might take 30 or 40 minutes, but at least you would know that it worked. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. This is going to tell you a lot of what I just said. And then I'm going to hit OK. Now you'll notice these files are already open. I'm going to go ahead and close it. In fact, I'm going to close Cantabile altogether. You could have it open. If Cantabile is already open, it will go ahead and find it and work with it. But I'm going to close it just to show that you don't really need Cantabile open to do any of this. So when I click OK, it opens Cantabile so you can watch what's happening. And so now it's just going through and it's opening each one of these files. It'll open the set list and each song file individually. If I want to, I can cancel it by clicking the cancel button there in the middle. You can also press Control-Alt-Shift-Enter to pause the test if you do need to try to do something else in the middle of the test, if you need to just pause it so that you can use your computer for a minute. You can see the test passed. You get a little check mark next to all these files, and that really just indicates not only that they passed, but it also means that it's not going to test these files again unless I run another command. So that's everything I wanted to show you today. If you do have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. It's tom@loudcrysoftware.com. And hope you find all this useful. Have a great day.